6 days without food left 300 German women weak and terrified in the dark belly of an Atlantic ship, surviving only on rust-tinged water and fading hope. Among them was Gertrude Steinberg, 23, clutching her knees through her tattered Luftwaffe uniform, no longer counting hours, only breaths, fearing each might be her last. The woman beside Gertrude, barely 19, had stopped moving that morning. No one checked if she was alive. They were all headed to the same fate anyway, or so they believed. Everything they had been told warned them. America meant torture, medical experiments, and death in desert camps. The propaganda minister himself said death was better than capture. They hadn't chosen capture. Allied forces swept through France near Cherbourg and took them. Now they were cargo in a ship reeking of engine oil, bound for an unknown horror. When the engine stopped and the hatch opened, sunlight poured in like fire. Gertrude tried to stand, but collapsed. Her legs gave out. American soldiers appeared as shadows in the blinding light. But instead of clubs or rifle butts, hands reached down and lifted them. Then came the first impossible sensation, the smell of grass, wind, cattle and earth, life instead of ruin. Her eyes adjusted to reveal something her mind refused to accept, a whole, unbombed city gleaming under a September sun. Houston, Texas, untouched, as if war existed in another universe. Loaded onto trains and then trucks, panic rose with each transfer. The older women prayed. The younger ones went silent, certain they were being driven to execution grounds. But through the canvas flaps came impossible images. Children playing in yards, farmers waving, towns with ice cream shops passing by as if millions weren't dying across the ocean. Hey dear, you have to follow us now so you get more of our World War II stories we document. Help us hit our target of 10K followers before the end of this month. Also, don't forget to like and share to your friends too. Now let's continue our video. For Gertrude, raised in Hamburg, the sheer scale of America was incomprehensible. They drove half a day and saw nothing but endless land, cattle and oil derricks against open sky. This was the America on the verge of collapse, the nation that would crumble under German might. The propaganda had been specific, terrifying, and now, visibly, catastrophically wrong. Goebbels had called Americans mongrels, raceless, honorless, cruel. Guards would be sadists. Women would be experimented on. Every soldier had been told death was preferable to this. The truck stopped at a camp near Hearn, Texas. There were fences and guard towers, yes, but the men who greeted them weren't screaming. Some weren't even carrying rifles. Men in wide-brimmed hats and worn denim stood beside military guards, looking curious rather than hostile. One tall, sun-weathered man actually tipped his hat. "Afternoon, ladies," he said. His name was Jim McCready. He ran a ranch 10 miles away. He told them through a translator that first things first, they needed to get fed. The word fed hung in the air like something alien. Gertrude's group of 30 was led not to punishment blocks, but to a long wooden building filled with an impossible smell, meat, vegetables, fresh bread. Real food, several women began to cry. Tables were set with plates, forks and napkins. Cowboys and local women bustled with pots and pans. Elsa, a nurse from Berlin, whispered, "It's psychological warfare. They're playing with us." They stood frozen, 30 skeletal women in tattered uniforms, staring at a feast they couldn't trust. Every instinct screamed poison, drugs, cruelty disguised as kindness. Jim stepped forward slowly, the way you'd approach a spooked horse. He tore a piece of bread, took a bite himself, and held out the other half to Gertrude. Her hand trembled. The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours. Cowboys exchanged baffled glances. These weren't fierce fanatics. These were terrified young women on the edge of collapse. Finally, Marie, barely 18 and the youngest among them, took a stumbling step forward. Her shaking hand touched the bread. When nothing bad happened, she lifted it and took a bite. "It's real," Marie whispered in German. "It's real food. That broke the dam." Bodies overruled minds. Gertrude moved forward with the others, and the first taste of beef stew was like swallowing sunlight. Some ate too fast and became sick. Others could only manage a few bites. But they all ate, tears mixing with the first real food they had seen since France. Jim stood back, hat in hand, watching enemies discover that their worst fears were lies. His ranch hand Buck said quietly, "They really thought we were going to starve them." Gertrude kept waiting for the trap to spring, for laughter, for snatched plates, for the real cruelty to begin. Instead, a cowboy refilled her water. A woman brought out apple pie. They were led to barracks with beds, blankets, and windows that opened to the evening air. Gertrude lay on a mattress for the first time in weeks, stomach full for the first time in months. She thought about the propaganda. Monsters didn't feed enemies apple pie. They didn't tip their hats or look genuinely worried when prisoners were too scared to eat. As sleep took her, Gertrude concluded either everything she'd been taught was a lie, or this was the most elaborate deception in the history of warfare. Tomorrow would tell which. Morning brought the familiar ache of hunger and the belief it had all been a dream, until the smell of bacon and coffee drifted through the barrack windows and made stomachs clench with desperate hope. Elsa still insisted it was conditioning, feed them once to make the starvation worse. But Jim appeared hat in hand again, smiling. "Breakfast is ready when you are, take your time." The mess hall was alive with cowboys eating and talking. The table was set again. Eggs, bacon in obscene abundance, golden biscuits, white gravy, real butter, jam in 3 colors, fresh milk. Martha Holtzman, a signals operator from Munich, heard her training officer's voice. "Americans will try to break you with false kindness, but hunger is stronger than propaganda." When Marie reached for a biscuit, Martha followed. The first bite of bacon, salt, fat, smoke, tasted like sin. Flavors that had vanished from Germany years ago flooded back all at once. A young cowboy noticed Martha eating too fast and gently pushed the water pitcher toward her. "Drink between bites, helps it settle." He said it with no cruelty, only casual concern. This kindness was unbearable. Cruelty she could have resisted. But casual human concern from an enemy made no sense in the world she knew, and that made it more devastating, not less. Gertrude overheard Jim planning the day. "Don't want them overdoing it after what they've been through." As if their suffering mattered. As if they were people worthy of consideration. Anna Richter, 21, broke down sobbing over her eggs. Not from sadness, from the complete collapse of everything she'd believed. She had told her mother death was better than American capture. The cultural collision was total. Cowboys who saw feeding hungry people as simple decency faced women raised in scarcity, indoctrinated with hate, and now drowning helplessly in plenty. Jim walked over and asked through the translator if something was wrong with the food. How could they explain that his kindness was more devastating than cruelty would ever have been? "Out here in Texas, we don't let folks go hungry," Jim said. "Don't matter where they're from." As if nationality was no more important than hair color. As if being the enemy was just a detail. The women talked not about escape, but about flavors. The layered biscuits, the salty bacon, the unfamiliar jam. It was easier to focus on food than to confront the earthquake in their minds. Then cowboys cleared their own plates. One older man took Martha's empty dish, touched his hat brim and said, "Appreciate you ladies coming out today," before she had done a single hour of work. Work assignments came next, kitchen help, garden work, lighter cattle duties. They were given gloves, hats, and water stations placed along the route. Their comfort was being considered, 3 meals a day. Meat at nearly every meal, fresh vegetables, real bread, desserts. The women gained weight. Hollow eyes filled in, and cowboys said please and thank you without exception. One evening, Gertrude watched the sunset with Jim nearby. He told her his grandfather had come from Ireland during the famine. Strangers had fed him, given him work. That's what America was supposed to be. That night she wrote in her journal, "They continue to feed us as if we are guests. Either Americans are the greatest deceivers in history, or everything we were told was a lie." The apple pie became the breaking point. Betty the cook pulled 3 pies from the oven and announced cheerfully that the women deserved something special after the fence work. Deserved. Martha discovered she had a gift with horses. Jim watched her gentle a spooked mare with whispered German and patient hands, then offered her the role of main horse handler, her choice entirely. Anna learned to ride and joined cattle drives, her Bavarian accent mangling cowboy calls. The cowboys loved it, teaching her slang with endless patience and loud, genuine amusement. Elsa, the suspicious nurse, became the ranch's unofficial medic. When a cowboy cut his hand, she bandaged it efficiently. He tried to pay her from his own pocket. She stared, completely confused. In December, they were invited, not ordered, to a barn dance at a neighboring ranch. Music filled a warm barn. A shy young cowboy held out his hand to Gertrude, and she danced for the first time since 1941. She wrote in her journal, "I dance tonight. The world is ending and beginning at the same time." For 3 minutes she had not been a prisoner. She had simply been a woman dancing. Letters home became impossible to write. How could they explain gaining weight while Germany starved? That Jim's wife had taught them to make apple pie, patient and laughing the whole afternoon. Then April 1945 arrived. Hitler was dead. Berlin had fallen. Germany had surrendered. Standing in Jim's warm kitchen listening to the radio, many women felt not despair, but relief. It was over. Jim told them they would go home when transport could be arranged. Home, to rubble and starvation. Here they had work, food and dignity. The word home had never felt so complicated. In the final months, cowboys gave handmade gifts. Betty pressed recipe cards into Gertrude's hands. Cornbread so she could make it in Germany, as if cornmeal would exist among the ruins. When the trucks came in August 1945, Jim stood with his hat over his heart. "You ladies take care now, you're always welcome back." Enemy prisoners welcomed back. The world had gone insane with kindness. The journey home was a descent into apocalypse. But the women carried something unconfiscatable, proof that enemies were just people, and that kindness could survive even the worst war in human history. In 1952, a letter reached Gertrude from Jim McCready. "The ranch is still here if you ever want to visit. P.S. Betty says hello and hopes you still remember how to make cornbread." She kept it for the rest of her life.